thanks for folks who are just joining us for the first time today. I would just ask if you would sign in so we know. There's a sign-in sheet on the table by the door so we know how many people are here. I see lots of folks from the anthropology world and the Theravada world, so please just go ahead and please let us know you're here so we have it to know who joined the event. So it's really a great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Professor Katherine Bowie. This is the first event of many that I expect will be organized to celebrate her scholarship and struggle, I think probably in both Madison and in Thailand, as she embarks on retirement, i.e. a life of research and writing without teaching and administration. Yes. Maybe also Netflix.
Definitely Netflix.
I first met Katherine 24 years ago when I came to Madison to go to Siasi to study Thai for the summer. I had just finished my first year of grad school, and I had just a few months earlier read Rituals of National Loyalty, her phenomenal ethnography of right-wing village scouts in the mid-1970s in Thailand. That year, there were over 10, I don't remember the exact number anymore, women graduate students studying Thai at Siasi, and Katherine invited us all over to her house for dinner. I remember being terrified. How could I possibly do something as normal as eat a meal with the person who had unmasked the ways in which the Thai right wing initiated their co-conspirators? And I think we were all in awe. I don't know if Katherine had any idea of how in awe this group of graduate students were of her. We sat in her living room eating lasagna. And I have to confess that I was too afraid to ask the questions that I really wanted to ask, and I think I also didn't know how to ask them yet. How had she done the research? How had she written about it? So I stayed on safe ground and I complimented the delicious lasagna. Over the next years, as I researched the history of a movement and the violence with which it was met of farmers in northern Thailand, Katherine's work continued to inspire and challenge me. In the days before you could find any dissertation in PDF form online, I Xeroxed her PDF thesis in the Chiang Mai University Library, a remarkable thesis that you can now get the PDF version online, which I would urge people to read because she unmasks the fiction that peasants were happy being oppressed by the lords, in all the ways in which people express that. And this is what Katherine does. She pulls away the layers of fiction to reveal the truths of state violence, of rural life, of women's lives, of dissident monks, of many different kinds of peripheries. And so after threatening retirement for a few years, in early March, just as we were making the final decisions about the schedule for this workshop, Katherine realized when she told me that she had passed the point of no return, sending the email to her chair formally retiring, I decided that I had to convince her to speak as part of this grad workshop. What could be more important for a group of colleagues just beginning to navigate the university and research in Southeast Asia in a time of authoritarianism than hearing from someone who has witnessed, researched, and survived a great deal? So, when I proposed to Katherine that she talk about her life and scholarship, she reluctantly agreed, but then asked if she could present a research paper instead. At first, wanting to be deferential, I said yes. And then a week later, I said, no, actually, I really want you to talk about how you have navigated the university, the repressive Thai state, and various iterations of authoritarianism on various land masses. She graciously agreed to my pushy request. So, Katherine.
Yeah, because I had just received an email that had upset me about 104. So at that moment I went, okay, I'm ready, I'm gonna do it. And the only thing I could think of was Bloodied but Unbowed. And then I mentioned that to Tyrrell, and the next thing I knew, there it is on the title. So, okay, here we go. So I arrive on the world stage with my mom at her wedding, 5 months pregnant. I kicked on that day, apparently. So, I have mixed feelings about her views on abortion. Anyway, so they got married in Switzerland. I didn't find out until I was in my 20s. Anyway, and then my father was a young doctor and spending all the time in the hospital. I was actually born in England. And so my mother took me to Switzerland. Those are the two aunts who raised her. So my first language was actually Swiss German, which really upset my father. So I spent a lot of time with these two. These were the two aunts that raised my mother, and that was the wife of the school teacher who taught my mother English, even though she had never heard English actually pronounced and spoken. So my mother had an interesting accent for a time. In 1955, we immigrated from England to Manitoba, and this is the actual ship, the Georgic, that we came over on. And so my father was the country doctor, and literally people would pick him up with horse-drawn sleds. This is a fancy one. The ones I usually saw my dad in were wood covered, and one time at least I remember that the wood-burning stove inside caught fire. I was so I loved Treherne. It was a town of about 700-800 people, and the big event was Saturday night square dancing. And I could hardly wait. I was only allowed to square dance the first half hour, and then I was sent home with the babysitter. So I could hardly wait until I could actually dance all night, square dancing. Not to be, because we left Canada in 1958, and we moved to Rochester, Minnesota. My father became a resident at the Mayo Clinic. Oh my God, Rochester? Definitely. Pinnacle of civilization. I saw an escalator for the first time. I am still afraid to get on escalators. I always remember the first moment. And the Red Owl, it had automatic opening doors. You put your foot on the door opened. We lived in the country, and we'd come into town once a week. And me and my brothers would be at the front door of the Red Owl, opening it for everybody, because we thought that was so cool. I went to a country school, so 2 teachers taught 8 classes. I was in the 3rd grade. Oh my God, I was so jealous of the 8th graders. They were reading Evangeline and really cool poetry, but I was in the 3rd grade, but I got to listen while all the other kids were doing. And it was in the 3rd grade that I read the poem Invictus, which is where the title comes from, because somehow it has stuck with me all these years. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. That's not true. I have winced and I have cried aloud. Anyway, but it's, under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So that poem has stayed with me over the years. So in Rochester, my family grew. You can see my Swiss heritage. I had braids. And my little brother is wearing a little Swiss boy's outfit, yeah. I found moving to the U.S. Kind of a culture shock. So it was difficult, but I poured my heart and soul into dance. I did ballet 3 times a week. My teacher was also, she had danced with Jose Greco, so I did Spanish dance. And I was in a lot of musicals. I scared children being the scary spider in Toyland. I did the choreography for Unsinkable Molly Brown. I was the lead dancer for a community theater performance in My Fair Lady. 1967, I'm off to college. What an amazing time. I was at Stanford. David Harris was our student body president. He just burned his draft card, and he was dating Joan Baez, so the music, whatever he spoke, was great. And this was the time of the anti-war movement. And so my parents had told me there's more to college than classes, so I took that literally, and I spent a lot of time doing everything else. I was pre-med at the time, but my father kept asking me, don't you want to get married? And, you know, when I think on my main memory of my father is sitting in the bed with a medical text open, having dozed off with the bedside light still on. So he was basically working 24/7, except for the times when he dozed off. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, and Stanford has these study abroad programs, so I went to Stanford in Germany so that I could spend a lot of time going to Switzerland and seeing my grandmother and relatives there. So I dropped out of school, and I worked in classified advertising at the Minneapolis Star and Tribune. I then answered one of my own ads and started taking care of a woman that was paralyzed with polio. And then I went off to Switzerland, and there you can see me in the Zürich Tracht, the workday Tracht, not the fancy Sunday one. And this is the village that you can see from my mother's house, just across the valley. And my mother's village is located on the other side, and the side of this castle. Those are the vineyards. This is my mother's house right here. This is the schoolhouse where the lady lived, and we spent that time then reading German poetry. This was the inside of the house, and the chair where I sat for many months as I contemplated the meaning of the cosmos. And then, this is the part I didn't tell my kids while they were growing up. I hitchhiked through Europe, and that's not me, on my way to I still have the boots that my grandmother bought me. I was heading to Africa, but I got as far as the kibbutz in Israel and stayed there for a few months. But I was still reading, and that's when I realized that I was ready to go back to school. Because the cool thing about being in school is you read something and you can talk about it with other people. So back to Stanford, I majored in anthropology. My minor was religious studies. And in the course of that, I took a course with Frank Reynolds, who was then on sabbatical from the University of Chicago at Stanford. And this description of him is from an obituary. Leading scholar of Buddhism, revered teacher, Wendy Doniger writes, he trained some of the greatest scholars of Buddhism and of the broader history of religions in our generation. So I am one of those great scholars. Frank was amazing because most of the people he trained were trained in religious studies. But he was open to people like me who were studying anthropology. And I think it's because of his letter of recommendation that I then was accepted at the University of Chicago, where he was on the faculty. So I started in 1972, and Stanley Tambaya was my advisor. So I was his first American student, and I think he ruled the day. But I thought some of you might be interested, because now syllabi, I mean, they're learning objectives, and every week you read this. And this is the syllabus that Stanley Tambaya gave us. We were just supposed to read everything. This is just the first page. It wasn't assigned by week, you know, just read it all. And then I was taking class, Paul Ricoeur was at the University of Chicago and taught a course on the phenomenological foundations of the social sciences at 8 in the morning. And I was there every morning at 8, and sitting behind me was Stanley Tambaya and Marshall Solins. Oh, wow. Yeah. You guys can't laugh because this is too long as it is. Anyway, so this was a time where everybody is into phenomenology. How do we know truth? And for those of you that don't know what phenomenology is, it investigates the nature of subjective conscious experience, focusing on how things appear to us. So in my class, Chicago had found that their purebred racehorses with straight A's from Harvard weren't doing very well when they went to the field and they didn't have flush toilets. So they had changed their admission strategy to people who already had experience overseas. So my class had a fair number of Peace Corps and Mormon missionaries and I was the exception, I guess because I already had an international background. There were 34 people in my class, as I recall. 4 of us were female. So I had my pick of who I wanted to date, and of course I picked a lapsed Mormon with a fancy Mustang car. The car really wasn't why I was dating him, but anyway. So I think it was my long hair that he was into. And at a certain point, well, it was in the second year, he said, it's a whole long story, grad school is making us both neurotic. Why don't you quit and support me? That way, just one of us will be neurotic. So at that point, I went, end of relationship, to the hairdresser, cut my hair. My hair has been short ever since. So now it was time to go to Thailand. I kept having to fill in forms. I was still thinking I might go to Africa, but no, it ended up being Thailand. And it was after October 14th, 1973, the military dictatorship had been overthrown, popular uprising that you can see here. And I arrived the summer after, and my Thai teacher gave me her ticket to go to the funeral for the martyrs of October 14th. So that ceremony was in 1974. And at that point I decided I should stay on in Thailand because I didn't know what I was doing. I still didn't speak the language. I had 3 months of intensive Thai. That wasn't enough. I didn't know what to study. And I was at a gathering and I met a woman who was an economic journalist writing for Investor magazine, and they wanted to hire someone to be an editor for a yearbook on Thailand. So that sounded perfect. I took the job, and that allowed me, as I'm writing the various chapters, I was working on a chapter on religion, and I had a meeting with the Director General of the Religious Affairs Department, and the day before there had just been a large protest led by monks. And so all the journalists were wanting comments from the Director General. So I had to wait. They all left, and then I got to meet him. And my first question, of course, was, so what do you think about the monks leading the protest? And he said, well, you know, these were just men in yellow robes, not real monks. And I went, there's a lot of politics there. And at that point, I lost my interest in religion and got much more interested in politics. I was sharing a house with another woman who was a journalist, the one who had invited me to do the yearbook on Thailand. And she had scheduled to interview Dr. Tawat Mokharapong, who was the governor of Phang province and was in the news because he had decided not to renew the tin mining concession of a Dutch-American company named Temco. So Dr. Tawat is being attacked in all of the foreign language press as somebody who is destroying the future of foreign investment in Thailand. How can he do it? There was an attempt to assassinate him, et cetera, et cetera. So my housemate was supposed to interview him, but she was sick, that's that whole story, and wanted me to do it. I'm going, I'm a grad student, But then the phone rang, and it was Dr. Tawat wanting to cancel the interview. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but I said, gee, I actually would love to know what your reasoning is, and I've read your dissertation on 1932, which is the overthrow of the absolute monarchy in Thailand. And he said, well, I'm busy, but okay. I'm willing to meet. He wasn't busy. We spent the day talking. He took me to dinner. We had a great time. He invited me to Phang. It was all great fun. I wrote up the interview, and Investor magazine wouldn't print it. That was my first experience with censorship. So I went to the Bangkok Post, and I said, will you print it? And they said, okay. So that began my relationship with the Bangkok Post. And here I am as a young freelancer. I had a great nose for great stories, and I was too stupid to understand how dangerous all of this was. There I am, another opportunity to talk to people. So I started writing for the Bangkok Post, This was about an antimony mine in Lamphun. And then I noticed that farmer leaders belonging to the same organization were all being assassinated. So about 30 farmer leaders were assassinated in a 6-week period. I didn't see anything in the English language press about it, and I decided to take my fledgling tie off and start interviewing. And another story was there was a by-election in Chiang Mai, and so I went up and I interviewed the various candidates, one of whom was Thaksin's father, Thaksin Shinawat's father. But the most interesting of all of the candidates was this person, Dr. Bunsanong Punyotian. So he had just done his PhD at Cornell, had returned to Thailand, and was the Secretary General of the Socialist Party of Thailand. So he could see that I found all of the Socialist Party was very actively involved in organizing the Farmer Federation of Thailand, whose leaders were being assassinated. And so he could tell that I was very interested in all of these various things, and he started inviting me to various rallies, to various meetings. I had lots of opportunities to meet very interesting people. And I had spent a lot of time in the north, but not so much in the south. And so at one point, Dr. Bunsanong was invited to speak at a rally in Songkhla, and I wanted to meet Bosu, who was had just surrendered, described as a bandit chief, a separatist leader. But I noticed he'd also been a school teacher, so I figured, he's probably the kind of person who may be interesting to meet. So Dr. Bunsanong agreed to take me, and here we are meeting with Bosu, and that's me with Bosu and his wife. There are more stories about that, but never mind. So now I had traveled from one end of the country. I knew what I wanted to write my dissertation about. I was going to be the next William Hinton, and not writing about the revolution in China, but Thailand. So Intasi Bunduang was the head of the Farmers Federation in northern Thailand. He had been assassinated. Siton Yotkanta was his replacement. So I met Siton through Dr. Bunsanong in Bangkok, and Siton agreed that he would let me live with his family in the north and write about the movement. So that was my plan. Only a bomb was thrown at Siton's house. Someone who looked like Siton was shot and killed, and at that point Siton went underground with his family. So that avenue of research was closed off. And remarkably, so 2 years ago I started doing exploratory research on the rise of the Communist Party in Thailand, and so that's why there's that picture. And so in the course of interviewing various people, someone said, would I like to meet, there was a group of communists, would I like to meet them? And I said, of course. So I walk into the room, and one of them looks up at me and she says, "Are you the American who came with Dr. Bunsanong and was going to live with my family?" I went, "Oh my Lord." So that is her. So, and by chance, I happened to have, someone knew I was interested in all of this, and many years ago had sent me Siton's autobiography. He has already died. So I have his autobiography, which I had started to translate and was thinking of Turl, but I knew she was going to ask me for more context, so you're going to have to wait. So my life changed on February 28th, 1976, when I woke up to the news that Dr. Bunsanong had been assassinated. And that's the car that he was in. And here is the Thai announcement. And this is the Reuters, and just to give you the context, the killing of the socialist leader followed a week of confusion here, during which the commander-in-chief of the Royal Thai Army, General Bunchai Pham, was reported by newspapers as having said that some groups of young officers had been planning a coup. So this was a time, this is my grandson. Henry knows which is the distressing part of all of this. He's feeling my feelings. Anyway, so in no time at all, headline in the paper is American to be questioned. That's me. So here, investigators are planning to talk to an American student here on a research study that reportedly introduced Dr. Bunsenong to Israeli Embassy Second Secretary Ms. Margot Hinkey. Dr. Bunsenong attended a party at Ms. Hinkey's Soichet residence from 7:30 to 12:30 p.m. on Friday night. Half an hour later, he was ambushed and killed as he drove home along the superhighway. So, Margot worked for the Australian Embassy. She was single. She had a beautiful house. She knew I was an impoverished grad student. She had invited me to stay at her house. This party was a farewell party because she was going back to Australia. And so that's how, so Bunsenong was killed leaving her party. And then, so then the police were looking for me, and here's, told the embassy, blah, 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 they're seeking information, blah, blah, blah. The part I enjoyed was press editors, they responded that this is WikiLeaks, by the way. It turns out I'm in there. Responded that he had met and talked with her on several occasions about a year ago when she requested information from the embassy for an article she was writing on Thai-U.S. relations. And I included this picture for my family. So during this period, Peableman was a labor organizer and was very concerned about the gravity of the situation that I was in. Basically, didn't want me going anywhere alone, and when he was with me, he was carrying a gun, which freaked me out. But this is his family, and his son was part of a b-boy band called Sequint. So my younger son came home with very fashionable clothes, thanks to Yoshi. White pants I was not grateful to Yoshi for, but anyway. And then Belle is another friend who came to visit a year before Thanksgiving. And it turns out he knew Nalin. It's like, oh my gosh, so this is why I had to put this slide in there. At the time, Peableman wasn't married yet. They were just dating. So Peableman escorted me to the funeral. He took me to go shopping to get black clothes, and then to the funeral. And I went to the rallies that were organized on his behalf. And I was actually staying with Lou Simons, who was a journalist for the Washington Post then, kindly let me hide out there. And then someone who I suspect was CIA got in touch and said basically, when elephants are dancing, mice should stay out of the way, and you, Katherine, are a mouse. And so he got a plane ticket, had me fly to Penang, contacted my parents, who started freaking out, to send a ticket so that I could return to the US. And that VW bug is there because that is how I left Thailand. I had my purse, I had a nightgown that this person's wife gave me. I was smuggled to the airport in the backseat of this VW bug with a blanket over me and told to wait while he went in, I think to make sure that I was going to go smoothly through immigration and leave the country. So I arrived in Penang and then waited for my parents to send the ticket. The embassy is tracking me, and so, assume Katherine Bowie's now left Malaysia. So, just when I think everything is going to settle down, I have just arrived back in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm sitting on the couch in my parents' house, and there's a knock at the door, and it is someone from the Rochester Post-Bulletin, says to my mom, hello, I'd like a picture of your daughter. I understand she's been arrested in Turkey. And my mom was going, if my daughter were arrested in Turkey, do you think I would give you a picture? So the journalist had to explain that, well, maybe you'd want publicity. And well, she's not arrested in Turkey. She's sitting right here on the couch. And I'm thinking, the journalist is going to go back to the office. It was apparently a request from Chicago. a journalist in Chicago, the Chicago Tribune, was going to do a story, and they wanted a picture. So I thought, she's just going to go to the office, find out that she got Thailand and Turkey confused. It could happen to anyone. And and then come right back. So I said, look, I just got back from Thailand, not Turkey, and a friend of mine has been assassinated. It would be wonderful if you'd like to write a story about him. I would be happy to give you background. So then I found out he was doing it. I called this journalist in Bangkok. He was doing it because I had disappeared suddenly, and he was worried. And he thought that by writing a story, he would be helping me. It turned out this was a disaster. I asked him to cancel the story, but I now realize that that never happened. So the Chicago Tribune had contacted the University of Chicago to get a photo for me. So when the University of Chicago, the department, found out that I was in some kind of situation in Thailand, the rumors started going, oh my God. And there was already one graduate student that was working in Thailand that we had. It's the only person that I do not have a good relationship with. Just keep that woman far from me. So she was going around telling everybody that because of my outrageous behavior in Thailand, I was jeopardizing the visas for all other graduate students at the University of Chicago, and probably indeed the entire United States. Meanwhile, the faculty are all discussing this, and they have decided that I am no longer appropriate as an academic, that I have become biased and journalistic evidently being a negative term. Fortunately, among the people that I went to see when I returned to Chicago was Arthur Stinchcomb, and I am ever grateful to him for his phrase where he said, just because you want the peasants to win doesn't mean they will. Because that became an incentive to me to really want to understand the complexity of the situation of their struggle. But I couldn't relate to people in the US at this point. My friends, grad student friends at Chicago, were still wanting to know what truth was. And I'm going, what happened to common sense? People are dying. Enough already. So I get on the plane back to Thailand, but I have had death threats. And my name is all over. I mean, this had continued way too long. So I'm rumored to have murdered people I have never even met. So I decided I better check in with the American Embassy. Well, the person that I met there was a complete idiot. Didn't know who Dr. Bunsanong was, didn't know who I was, and basically said, well, I can't guarantee your safety. You might get hit by a bus when you leave here. If that's the level of risk, I'm fine. But somehow I thought I better take some extra steps. And amusingly, in retrospect, later on, somebody from the embassy did contact me. They had picked up my name only because of transliteration problems. Instead of filing it under Bowie, they had filed it under Barry. So anyway, so I went up to the north, and I went to see all the people that I had met when I was doing the various earlier interviews to get their assessment of whether or not I would be safe to do research. And everybody said, you need to talk to Sirising Samruang, who is a teacher at the Teachers College, has a wide network, and also writes for Jaturat, which was a respected leftist magazine at the time. So I met with him. People said he wouldn't want to meet with me because I was American, but I thought he'd probably be curious to meet an actual murderer, So he was. And then he agreed that he would help me find a village. And because at the Teachers College he oversaw practice teachers, he knew all of the village headmen and lots of teachers in a wide area. And he began asking them, who would be willing to have a weird American grad student live in their village, and eventually found one. So while I was trying to figure out, a field site in the north in this complicated situation, I lived in a girls' dormitory, actually owned by Breedy and Omyong's family, with a wonderful headmistress who didn't let anybody suspicious in. And so I felt very safe there. And I was working with a professor at Thammasat University who was an economic historian, from whom I also learned a lot. So on the night of February 5th, it was getting clear that things were heating up at Thammasat. And that night, there were a group of girls in the dorm. We all had found each other who was following politics. And there's a knock on my room saying, "Katherine, you have to listen to the radio." So we spent that night listening to the military radio, Yankra. And everybody said, "Katherine, you're not going to Thammasat tomorrow." So I didn't, and I fortunately missed having to see all of this myself. And then later that day, some 3,000 people at Thammasat were arrested, and another 3,000 arrested across the country. Sura Singh was one of the 4 at the Chiang Mai Teachers College to be arrested, so I wasn't sure what was going to happen. It turned out that he was tipped off in advance because he lived outside of the city. So people had warned him not to go home. Police had surrounded his home. They had searched his home. But he laid low and then later made contact and had to report every week, had to do a month of re-education and had his salary docked for 2 months. But he had found a village where I could settle in. The story is a little more complicated. I had problems with the first side, but finally, fieldwork begins. Where are we? So, the mountains in Switzerland. I'm home. This is what ordinary homes were looking like. But I had been assigned to live with the sub-district chief who ran the underground lottery. And police visited once a month. So a very interesting household. And, so in that early phase, I'm having to learn the dialect, Northern Thai. I'm just like, Sura Singh had given me coaching on how to eat properly, so I didn't appall people right off the bat, how to walk in houses with wooden floors. So I was briefed. And then I was out, if people are in the fields, then I should be in the fields, learning to plant, learning to do everything. But my Thai father didn't have the same view. His view was that I was losing face for his family by engaging in physical labor. And so I was not to be in the fields. Well, I was so relieved because in the waters here are leeches and snakes and other creepy crawlers. So it was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't think I'll be able to plant today or my father will get upset. But, I learned other skills like drawing well water and doing laundry and just watched what everybody was doing. So I'm just going to go through these very quickly because I haven't even gotten to the key part of my life, the other part of my life. So there's just scenes in the village, planting, etc., fishing. Here I am screwing up people's bamboo. My village did a lot of mat weaving. So, I'm just socializing and talking and hanging. And my Thai father allowed me to type. This did fit the specifications that he had. And this is when I also gathered the information on village scouts, this 5-day counterinsurgency ritual where people had 13 hours sleep spread over 5 days, carried off on stretchers, overcome by their love of the king, nation, and religion. My life changes again Christmas Eve, 1977. It was time to harvest and thresh the rice. and neighbors had invited me to join, and my Thai father was out drinking, and my Thai mother said, sure, it's fine, you go. So off I went. They were relatives of hers after all anyway. So off I went, spent the night threshing, got back, and in the morning I learned that my Thai father had come back, was furious that I had disobeyed him, and smashed a water pot, and my Thai mother in the morning said, you need to find somewhere else to live. So it's Christmas Eve, hello, I am identifying with Mary and Joseph looking for some place to place their baby. I don't have a home either, and I went over to see the school principal, and he said, Catherine, we always thought it was a mistake for you to live there. I wanted you to live with my family, but my wife thought you were a man. Because when she first saw you, you were wearing a jean jacket and jeans, and your hair was short. But now she knows you're not, and so come and move in with us. And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship that has lasted some 40 whatever years. And that's the kitchen in those days. And this is Narang, the school principal. He had been a Buddhist novice. He was incredibly smart, incredibly good at explaining concepts to me in words that I understood. Unfortunately, he died. And this is my Thai family. This is my sister. And these two took over. They've been my right hand doing all these interviews. It's been an amazing, I am so lucky. So I move in with them. Life is improving. And we have lots of conversations, Narang and I, about how to help with the situation of poverty, because about 60% of the village is landless. And so we decide that we should start a mat weaving cooperative. So now I go from a CIA agent to a communist. And there are all kinds of rumors about how we're communists. Gongchan is getting very upset. This creates marital strife. She at one point says to me, Catherine, it's all right if something happens to you because you don't have children. But in my case, if anything happens to Rang, he has, I have a 4th grade education and 2 children, and I will be able to support the family. So that was kind of a tense moment in the relationship. I told Narang said, see what it's like being married to a woman with a 4th grade education? She's never understood me. Oh, anyway, we all worked it out. We all bonded even more tightly as a result. And this was a description of the mat weaving cooperative. We had 100 landless families. This is one of the groups that's the house where we would store the mats. The mats were initially used for threshing rice, and so at threshing time, people would be weaving them all year, and then at threshing time, the price would double. So the middlemen were making 100% profit twice a year. So if we could do that ourselves and then return the money to the weavers, that would be a way to help them. But we had to get a loan, so that was a problem. No, I didn't set an alarm. This is my real Thai father. He was a carpenter. If you've been at my house and you see the guitars or the spirit house in the back of the house, he's the carpenter who made them. And he said, I had talked to the YMCA. They had loans, allegedly to support poor people, but you had to have collateral. And I said, well, why don't you just cut the BS and say you just want to help middle-class villagers. You don't really want to help poor people, because poor people don't have any land as collateral. Hello? But Patun was not to be deterred. He said, he'd been in town, he'd seen the Y, and they had a saying, give a man a fish, they eat for a day, teach a man to fish, they live for a lifetime. He said, let's get the loan. Go back. So we went back with Patun, and I made the argument they should quit being hypocritical, and they really wanted to help the poor. Patun said they didn't have any collateral on the loan, but the YMCA could shoot. There were 10 leaders in the group. They could shoot one of them each month for that they defaulted on the interest on the loan, and the board, I knew 3 out of 5 of the board members, they were all shocked. Okay, let's give them the loan. We were the only group that paid the loan back with interest. So here we are starting to organize it. Mainly women were doing the weaving. And then mainly the men were the ones that they were more of them that were literate to keep accounts and going into the forest to get bamboo. So this became almost a nightly experience because every day there was some problem that we had to deal with. And so getting the bamboo from the forest, dividing it, there were fights over that, so then drawing lots to make it easier. And here we are then with the first person to actually receive money from the group. And in the meantime, I am doing research. I want to study peasant court relations because the village I'm living in had lands owned by a lord. I developed a questionnaire, and I was denied permission to ask any of the questions because anything to do with peasant court relations was considered communist. Feudalism, sucking on, all bad. But I had read Carl Wittfogel, and there might be a relationship between the history of the development of irrigation and the lords. So I put in a new request to study the history of irrigation. That was approved because that sounds technocratic. Development, that's good, right? And I was free to do my research. So that became my master's thesis, and I was now ready to go back to the University of Chicago. I had to gain readmission. That's a whole nother problem because remember, I'm in the doghouse there. But Frank Reynolds was always a stalwart and held firm. Chris Lehman in the back, and Gerard Deflo, various people in this picture. This is me in case you can't recognize me because I changed so much. And I'm no longer interested in anything to do with Tambaya, galactic polity, theater state, forget all of that. I am now into Theda Scotchpole, States and Social Revolutions. Thank God she had been denied tenure at Harvard and was at the University of Chicago. And we were both reading, she had already read it before, Barrington Moore, Social Origins of Dictatorship and Democracy, Lord and Peasant and the Making of the Modern World. Great book. So forget theater state, forget galactic polity. I'm ready to go to Thailand now. I have my topic. I am, oh dear, visa problems yet again. I had written a brilliant grant proposal, submitted to Fulbright and SSRC. People on my dissertation committee had failed to even think about, they were so far high up in the ivory tower, they had forgotten about the reality that I would have to get research clearance from the Thai government to be able to do this research. And my first paragraph had a quote from Marx. Not good. Surprise! So everybody else is getting rejected from Fulbright, but I'm still haven't heard anything. I go to see the Chicago office, and they say, "Oh, it's great. That means that you're at the final stage. You're at the Thai government just has to approve." I went, "What?" I knew I was in trouble. Thank God, SSRC stood by me. They let me change the title of the grant. It turned out to be a silver lining because while I'm having to figure out how to redo my life, I start doing archival research in the library, reading Presbyterian missionary records, the old newspapers, Bangkok Times Weekly Mail, Rangoon Gazette Weekly Budget. And in 1984, I get a visa, dissertation fieldwork begins. Life is good. Only I have complicated things because I have started dating this black activist with a reputation at the University of Chicago as a troublemaker. So he had started a group called CAUSE, Committee Assembled in Unity and Solidarity with El Salvador, which actually for him was a pun because he was at the time a graduate student doing 16th and 17th century English literature, and there was a group called CAUSE back then. So for him, this was a pun. For the rest, it was working on Central America issues. So started dating and married, and for me it was learning about the south side of Chicago and the lives of African Americans in the U.S. It was a whole nother anthropological experience. That's me with my mother-in-law great-grandmother, that's my then husband, and my father-in-law, wonderful family. New challenge. Challenge of doing field work married. There's challenges doing it when you're single, but there are challenges when you're doing it when you're married, especially if your husband doesn't speak any Thai. So, so Hugh was learning all these things, and he would spend the day reading. I was doing my dissertation research. I was interviewing people, in their 80s, whatever. I interviewed over 500 people in their 80s for life in the 19th century. Wonderful, amazing people. And this is one of my favorite pictures. So I was interviewing all day and come home exhausted. He'd been reading all day, he hadn't talked to anybody, and so, ta-ha! So in 1986, he heads to England, to the British Library, and then I join him in England, and I'm doing some work in the archives, and then we go back to Chicago. And so there's Kew Gardens. And we continue with our work with being active in these various groups, March on Washington, et cetera, et cetera. And 1988, I defend my dissertation, and I get a job, woohoo, at UW-Madison. Well, it doesn't take long for problems to start. Here we are, I've just barely arrived, and I'm writing to inform you of a telephone conversation which took place between Professor X and me on the morning of Sunday, March 4th. Professor X threatened to adversely influence my review, our annual review. If I disagree with him with regard to a dissertation defense, since he's chair of my review committee, I'm deeply concerned. And it's a long letter, but he described me as I had sent my comments to the student in advance so they could look good when I asked it. And so this professor started, he called my comments silly and racist, which is really funny, etc. So let's get the context. 1989, 16% of the faculty here were women, 393 out of 2,407. 11.7 of the female faculty were tenured. These are some of the articles. So 54.5% of female faculty would get tenure. 72.5% of male faculty were getting tenure. So the theory was that it was because women were spending more time on childcare, but it turns out that female faculty were less likely to have children than male faculty. So that was not the issue. So at this time, then there are starting to be more articles, and I get pregnant with my son Matthew, who is somewhere here. There he is over there. That's a grown-up version of him. He was cute even then. And it turns out that Madison had just passed the parental leave policy in 1988, and I turned out to be the first faculty member to use this policy that passed in 1988. And I'm looking at time. There won't be time for questions if I keep babbling like this. But this letter from my ex-husband is kind of cute. I found it yesterday as I was going through getting ready. Just at Christmas, Matthew has just been born. I, Hugh Wilson, agreed to do the dishes, to cook dinner the majority of the time, to clean the bathroom and mop the kitchen floor once a month for the duration of Catherine's breastfeeding of our son Matthew, circa 6 months. I did it much longer, but anyway. Plus 2 months for the sheer hell of the months before and after delivery, signed Hugh Wilson. Like, P.S. Be it known that I love my wife. Why else would I sign this? So then, March 1991 is our annual review, and my contract is not renewed, i.e. I am fired. I am on parental leave. I am not on the payroll. I'm actually in another state. I am at Kenyon College, where my husband was teaching at the time. And the grounds for not renewing my contract were the publications. I had just translated Sura Singh's short stories and written an introduction. That was dismissed as non-anthropological. So no productivity for the year. And then 2 articles that I had submitted to journals were described as well argued but obvious. Well, those two articles ended up in the Journal of Asian Studies and American Ethnologist. So I agree they were well argued. But not obvious. So people that I am eternally grateful to is that there had been women who had survived the system before me. Donna Shalala was our chancellor. Without her in that position, I would not be here today. Robin Doucet was the person who did the study that revealed all of the statistics about how women were not surviving. Janet Hyde had been appointed as Vice Chancellor for Women's Affairs, a new position that Donna Shalala created. Diane Kravitz became the head of the University Committee at a key time, and Maria Cantion was the Associate Dean for Social Sciences. Also important are some men. Alfred McCoy was assigned to be my mentor. I always called him my tormentor, but he was a phenomenal mentor. I would not have survived without him. Dan Deppers, Russ Middleton were key. Andy Sutton was director, and Mike Cullinane was already here helping to do battle. And I also have to thank John Conlon, who was basically a Marxist economist who survived the University of Chicago, but helped me devise the strategy I used in my appeal for the position, which is rather than ask everybody in the department whether they should reverse the decision and renew my contract, I asked the department to consider whether the facts of my case had been fairly presented by the review subcommittee, so that the focus was on the three of them and not on me. And I thought that was a brilliant strategy, and that was one of the best talks I ever gave in my life. My life depended on it too. So back to normal and teaching and blah, 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 and I decided to have a second child. I call up the secretary to the faculty, can we have a second child? Will the tenure clock stop? And the secretary of the faculty said, well, it must. This is not China, referring to China's former one-child policy. So I go home and I get pregnant. Turns out I'm the first assistant professor to dare to have a second child. I call up Janet Hyde and say, as you know, things hadn't gone too well in my department the first time. And Janet's first words, it's good they have a sense of humor. She said, wow, you sure are fertile. So it turns out that they had specifically not addressed this issue when they designed the parental leave policy, because they didn't want a bunch of men at the faculty meeting debating how many times women were going to get pregnant in order to delay a tenure decision. So Diane Kravitz called me at home and she said, and again, this is another brilliant strategy. She said, Katherine, I'm really sorry you have to go through this, but I would like you to write me a letter asking if there is anything in the existing regulations of the university that would preclude granting a second extension of the tenure clock. So I wrote this letter, blah, 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 blah. While I do not believe that women should have to explain their childbearing decisions any more than men must, given the current academic context in which most female assistant professors have been reluctant to proceed with childbearing until after tenure, I am willing to share my reasons for my decision to have a second child. I'm currently 41 years old, will be 42 at the time of delivery. Given the statistics on the difficulty of conceiving past age 40, as well as the added complications for both mother and child with increased age, I do not feel I can safely wait until after the tenure decision. I did not enter into the decision to attempt to become pregnant again lightly. Given my age, pregnancy has proven to be a considerable strain on my body, developed gestational diabetes, ongoing. Despite these physical and psychological pressures, I believe I had a responsibility to my first child to try to provide him with a sibling. Since I love my career, I envision that much of my time will be taken up with my research. A sibling will ensure that my son has someone else to play with when he grows up. Furthermore, since my husband and I are older parents, we will not be in our children's lives as long as most other parents. I wanted to ensure that my son has someone else with whom he can turn to in times of need, who is also family. I am extremely concerned about my ability to keep pace with my colleagues while attempting to care for two very small children.
I sincerely hope that the University of Wisconsin's parental leave policy is indeed designed to ensure that no one must choose between their profession and a family, and if pregnant for a second time, between their career and an abortion. Yeah. So then they all get together and they meet, and this is the document that says there is nothing in the existing policies that would preclude a second extension. So this is the beginning of the history. It was all, this ate up years of my life. Maria is in the back. She's a witness to, she was the only person that knew, and Susan over there were the only people that knew what I was up to, because I didn't trust anybody in my department. I testified in the state legislature. At that point, parental leave only existed for UW-Madison, not for the other campuses. It was a more complicated thing, but the simplified thing is that, and at the end of all of this, it went system-wide. I was interviewed by the Justice Department. My case got tied up with C.L. Pillsbury's case, and as a result of all of this, UW changed its process, because in the past, if someone is denied tenure, if the department votes no, the administration had no recourse. The only recourse you had was to take the case to court and fight it out there. So as a result of these changes, the university is now able, if the department says no, the university, the deans, can appoint another committee to review the department's decision, so you don't have to go to court right away. So this is a note from my father, who had changed his views and begun to understand what it's like trying to survive in academics. And I found this note yesterday, which is rather touching. For what it's worth, tremendously admire your fight for your children. You have a lot of love and guts. So then there's the joys of doing field work with young children. So these are my kids in the field. And Matthew's famous quote, this is my Thai father, the carpenter, and his wife. Matthew's famous quote to me is, "Why is everyone talking Thai to me? I don't speak Thai." And then doing field work with small children. Some of you have heard the story. When Matt was a baby, I was interviewing this general and founder of the Border Patrol, general of the Border Patrol Police and founder of the Village Scout Movement. I was breastfeeding Matthew, and this is Dave Streckfuss, who was then a graduate student. He came along with me in case Matthew started crying. So I'm breastfeeding the general while I'm doing the interview, and he's cool with that, something I can't imagine an American general being cool with. And then the next year I do a follow-up interview, only this time Matthew is very sick and has diarrhea that pours out of his diapers all over the general's couch. So yeah, joys of doing field work with small children. Then there's the joys of being a single parent. And this is what, it's like, no matter how challenging the day was, you know, when you see them together like that, it's like, oh, I could do it, I could do it. So there they are, my kids when they're cute and young. There's the other one back there. Looks very different now. It's turned into I'm going to refrain from a description. And then both developed medical issues. Matt had heart problems. He ended up being the youngest child to undergo a tilt table test. He was 3 years old. That was done at a specialty clinic in Chicago. That's a whole long story drawing on my medical training when I was pre-med. James develops type 1 diabetes, appendicitis, yeah. Then my father has a terrible ski accident. He's in the hospital for 5 months. He's left partially paralyzed. I mean, yeah. Lots of fun times, which my friend Susan will recognize her kids in these pictures. Sleepovers. Susan would be taking the kids for sleepovers so that I could go to conferences. And my parents were coming over. And the kids grew up, lots of spaghetti dinners and sleepovers and all the rest. In the midst of all of this, I become center director. There are controversies over the Thai Pavilion. There's controversies over Hmong, leads to us writing a Luce Foundation grant. CS director again. Then I know my plan was to just do whatever Mike told me and sign. But that didn't work out because I no sooner was center director than cuts to Title VI of 47% were announced. So because we in Southeast Asia have so many less commonly taught languages, I think we were probably the hardest hit. I convened meetings of our faculty to discuss it. I opened it up to all the other centers, and we ended up in this room having quite a wild meeting, drafted a letter. People here are involved. And that letter was signed by over 100 faculty in 24 hours, and I sent that off to deans and chancellors, et cetera, et cetera. And in the end, we ended up developing distance education, and that's why I put Mary Jo Wilson's picture here, because she was key in convincing Mike and me that distance could actually work. And then there was controversy with Pavin coming to visit. And there were lots of meetings at my house as we're all, trying to come up with various plans. Then I get involved in Midwest Conference on Asian Affairs, Southeast Asia representative, become the program chair. I thought I had done a brilliant job organizing that. There's East Asia, Southeast Asia. We're all going to work together. We're going to host this together. Major problem is that by the time we actually host the conference, all the faculty directors that had said yes had left, and all the new ones were going, what? I didn't know. I become MCA president. That leads to me getting involved with the committee, council on committees or whatever, and then ultimately becoming AAS president. While I'm in that position, I work on the AAS database for less commonly taught languages. I push hard that AAS should be promoting regional languages, regional conferences instead of charging regional conferences for mailing lists, and put a lot of energy into AAS in Asia, which was an initiative that Tongchai himself, when he was AAS president, had gotten off the ground, and something that I think is the most exciting initiative that AAS has. So no sooner am I involved in all of this than we've had the conference in Korea, and then it's in Delhi in India. And the Ministry of External Affairs, MEA, will allow scholars from China, but they will not allow scholars from Pakistan. And that includes if you are born in England, but your grandmother or grandfather is Pakistani, you could not get a visa. So what to do? So now that I've learned about distance conferencing, we decided to teleconference those speakers in so they could still present. However, that wasn't good enough. Academics condemn AAS for this whole thing. Jim Scott, who's the keynote speaker, I'm having trouble forgiving him even though he's passed on, decides to lead a boycott. All kinds of people are signing, including faculty here at UW-Madison, none of them thinking that maybe they should call me first and find out what the story is. So here, then Pratap Mehta talks to Scott and convinces him that I won't go into how all of that happened, but anyway, Scott agrees then to be the keynote. I organize a special roundtable. What country can you have a conference in if you're going to have these kind of standards? At that point, there was a ban on visas for people from Muslim countries in the US. So it's kind of a pot calling kettle black. Next year, also controversial, that was in Bangkok. Thailand had a coup in 2014. Should the boycott or not? Al McCoy was our keynote speaker. The conference, the decision was, I told the Thais that, that were involved in the planning, this was their decision to make. And if they wanted to boycott, fine, and if they wanted to move ahead, fine. They wanted to move ahead, and Al was their chosen keynoter. So here's having fun at that. Retirement. So in conclusion, I have had a fulfilling life. I have loved and been loved. I have danced with Sulak Sivarak, a Buddhist intellectual. I don't think there's anyone, very few, I think I might be the only person in the world that can say that that's still alive. My office, this is what I want to be doing. This is why I'm retiring. Each of these piles represents at least an article, if not part of a book that I haven't finished. Plan to continue having fun with all my former students and friends in Thailand, and all of their friends, and meeting lots of interesting people, and keeping in touch with my Thai family.
And I have a lot of students. In this photo, only one, Matt Venker, has finished his PhD. Cyril and I are here waiting for the rest of them, and there are more in this room. So I know what I still need to do. And then, of course, this is work-related. This is work-related. You know that I'm into eunuchs and harems, so I'm not just watching Netflix. More time with my family, which is growing. So my son James got a dog. My son Matt got married to Amanda, who's back there, and has brought in Henry into the world. I may no longer be able to do ballet, but I can do West Coast swing dancing, and one of my favorite partners is right there in the back. So the future, I am handing it over to all of you. These are some of my former students in Thailand at the courthouse posting bail for some of their students. So as each of you seek to balance the struggle for social justice in your lives, let me conclude by sharing this prayer that I frequently reflect upon as I have faced various difficult junctures in my life. From Reinhold Niebuhr. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I used it time. It's their fault, they were laughing. I had it timed, it wasn't quite this bad.
Thank you so much, Katherine, and thank you so much for everyone who has come. We have a 15-minute break until our next lecture, so what I would say is everybody who wants to give Katherine a hug or ask her for more details on some of the incredible stories she told us, find her and then come back by 4, grabbing yourself a coffee or some tea in the interim. Thank you.